Oh my gosh, Brendan, we're back! We're back!
We're back, Rob. I'm so excited.
We're so happy that you're with us here on Game Fight Show. Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.
Rattlebox Games.
If you don't know what we're talking about here, then welcome aboard. You're in for one heck of a ride as we take 32 of the hottest games out there, and they go up against one another until one stands triumphant against the crowd.
I'm so glad to welcome our new listeners here, Rob. They've got a fresh new ticket. We're going to punch it full of 32 amazing games. And at the end...
Wait, they're not wearing clothes? New
listeners. Well, they could be new listeners, too. It's an audio format for just that reason. Listen unless you want to be comfortable. Yeah.
Clothes are optional.
Rob, I am super excited for our matchups today. For those of you who are brand new to the tournament, as Rob said, we're going to have a series of matchups in which we will determine which is the biggest, best, most exciting game of the year.
And that decision's going to be made with your help, folks. Brendan and I are strictly impartial commentators bringing to you our insights, but you are the deciders. The only way that we're going to bring this thing to a conclusion is if you go to our Twitter account at GameFight Show and vote.
Wait, what do they have to do, Rob?
They have to vote.
All right. Yeah, we're going to put up a poll each day asking you to pick between the two games in the matchup, and that's how we decide the winner.
That's how you decide the winner, listener. And speaking of winners, these first two games that are going up against one another, they are winners through and through.
This is really hard.
We have our number one seed here, the Crew. Quest for Planet 9.
Holy cow, so many people play this game, Rob. It is a delight. You can run around the table. You can... it just goes so fast. It's like the Lay's potato chips of board games. You finish one game, you just got to have another.
You can't play just one.
That's right. Plus, straight out of the barrel, in 2019, people are like, you know what? I think everything's decided. We know how all the games are going to do. Every new game, it's just going to be something we've seen before. And then somebody's like...
Remix culture, right there.
Yeah, exactly. And then somebody's like, wait a minute, how about co-op trick-taking?
What?
Co-op trick-taking? That's not possible.
It can't be done.
Turns out it can, and it's really fun.
This little gem from 2019, right now, it's sitting on the Board Game Geek list there at number 44, but ooh, boy, is it getting a lot of plays.
Now, Rob, this is a bit controversial. I will say there's some argument among the fans about how you should be logging your plays, so maybe there's a thumb on the scale there, but I don't care.
You know what? Thumb on the scale, finger in the dike, whatever it takes. Just get out there and have yourself some fun. Play that Quest for Planet 9. But you know what? It's going up against, this is no new kid on the block. The game that it's up against, 15 years its senior. It is none other than Goliath on the bracket. Betrayal at House on the Hill.
Betrayal at House on the Hill.
Oh my goodness. This, when you start talking to people and they come into the hobby and you're like, how did you come into the hobby? There's like 3 games they might pick. And one of them is Betrayal at House on the Hill. They're like, you know what? I was just shopping. I was looking for, the latest flavored Monopoly, and I saw this game with a scary greenhouse on the cover.
Scary greenhouse.
It's delightful American style storytelling.
Ameritrash.
With all kinds of dice rolling. You could play as a little kid. You could play as an old man. You could get destroyed by a creepy tentacle or perhaps by another player. It's got everything.
That's something that both of these games have going for them. I mean, they're both thematic games. If that's your big deciding point, then to me it looks like Betrayal has a bit of a head, because it's going to come out a little bit in the favor of Betrayal at House on the Hill, because the theme is just baked into everything. Like you said, right from the components through to the storytelling to the way that the mechanics are implemented throughout the game. It's all just reinforcing that classic horror movie theme that this game is so great at delivering to the table year in, year out. Whereas the Crew, Quest for Planet 9, it's got a science fiction theme, but tell me, what do you think from your experience? How integral is that to the actual gameplay?
Rob, the Crew Quest for Planet 9 could very well be about making food, and it could be the chef Quest for Pancake 9. I mean, really, there's no theme at all on this game. They do their best to give you a little story before each round. Where the Crew is going to excel is that you can play it in a few minutes, or you can play several rounds of it over the course of an hour or two. The rules are really easy to read, and as much as I love Betrayal at House on the Hill, we've all had that game of it where you sit down and you send the person off to the other room to read their traitor tome, and they come back, they're like, I don't understand what I'm supposed to do.
Please don't make the new player end up being the betrayer.
Yeah, no, don't do that. That is a rough challenge that Betrayal has to face, that, you know, the crew is just tight and slick. It's easy to learn, and you're going to play it in, you know, a half an hour or 45 minutes, as opposed to sometimes Betrayal will run a little bit too long. So it's the question of, you know, do you want the car with all the bells and whistles and maybe also a dragging tailpipe? Or do you want a little moped that's going to go really fast, but, you know, you can't carry everybody with it?
There you go. Well, you know, this is a question, it's worth asking, but it's not up to us to decide. Once again, if you feel that one of these games belongs on top, the only way you're going to see that happen is if you go to @GameFightShow on Twitter and you vote.
At Game Fight Show.
So, let's talk a little bit about the designers here. Now, you're talking about how there's sort of a streamlined feel to the play of the crew, right? And the crew that made this game, it's just one designer, it's just one artist. Do you feel like that's showing up there on the table?
Yeah, it's a unity of vision. You might even say the game sings.
Designer Thomas Singh.
Yeah, the game has a very tight, organized package that's unified throughout. Whereas, you know, Betrayal at House on the Hill, you're looking at a whole bunch of different people contributed. And as a result, you have every adventure feels a little different, which gives it, again, the variety.
We owe, I think, the listeners, to give a little bit of our expert insight here. You and I have both met Rob Diavio. Is it true that you've played some games with the original designer for House on the Hill?
Yeah, I can claim that's my minor claim to fame. I inadvertently played a game of Seven Wonders and lost to his son. Well, not inadvertently. It was not an accidental game of Seven Wonders. It was a game of Origins, and we just sat down and played. And at the end of the day, we were just making chit chat, and I said, "Have you been to Origins before?" And he said, "Oh yes, many times. I come here to pitch games to publishers." And I said, "Oh, have you designed anything I've played?" And he's like, "Well, have you played Betrayal at House on the Hill?" And
yes,
and
I have.
My jaw up off the floor. Yes, that's right. After I picked my jaw up off the floor,
was that Bruce?
That was Bruce Glasgow.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Well, if I can, part the veil a little in that conversation, my recollection is you said that once he brought that beautiful piece of work over to the people at Wizards of the Coast, or I guess at that point, it was probably Avalon Hill. I have the old red box.
And that makes you better than me, for certain.
Well, one of the things. But you said that he really was explaining that once it got in that house there, they really started getting their fingers into it. It doesn't have the unity of vision that maybe it did have when he brought it to them, because everyone was so excited by this wonderful, machine that he'd built that they wanted to plug in their own little bits and bobs, which I think, shows you how that Widow's Walk came out later, and they were able to go all over the universe and find different people to bring stories there.
Yeah, as we've said before, that's the charm of the game, is its multiplicity of vision.
Yep, well, I am very excited to see how these two come out. Go over, like we said, Twitter, @GameFightShow, and let your voice be heard. You know what I've heard, Brendan?
I don't, Rob.
I've heard
Please tell me.
that brass bell ringing over in Birmingham. And it's calling me over to the Great Western Trail, because we've got Brass Birmingham coming up against Great Western Trail in our second bout for this tournament.
Oh, man. I can't say what I've heard, Rob, because my olfactory nerves have burned away when my brain melted trying to play both of these games. These are titans of interesting economic engine building choices with huge sort of networks. You're moving your pieces around. I could spend 10 minutes babbling different mechanisms going on in these games, and I wouldn't scratch the surface.
No doubt. Well, and I happen to know that we have to once again remain impartial, but Brass Birmingham is a game that is close to your heart.
It is indeed. I've made no secret of it over on my other podcast, Pick Up and Deliver, that Martin Wallace is a favorite designer of mine. And I think Gavin Brown and Matt Tolman did a great job updating Wallace's original brass design to the new brass Birmingham. They added in this mechanism of beer that keeps some of the vicious pleasantries of brass, where I make a thing that I'm planning to use and then you use it and I get points because you used it, but I really needed it.
I didn't build that for you.
That's right. But, it doesn't have quite the same cutthroat nature as the cotton market in the original brass, which is now called Brass Lancashire. So it's a little more friendly. And also, oh man, the art on the Roxley edition, if you go by Brass Birmingham, it's beautiful.
Beautiful job. The art, it's sort of the unsung hero here in the whole hobby sometimes. And the art on that great game, we have David Forrest, who's done some great work in the past, Damian Mamaletti and Lena Cosette. And yeah, you're right. They brought the heat. They brought the heat.
Indeed. So yeah, it's, we might as well not even talk about Great Western Trail.
Well, this is an interesting, before we do talk about Great Western Trail, I want to point out that this is, I believe, the most even bout as far as the seed perspective is concerned. This is the 16th seed going up against the 17th seed. So in our 17th seed, we do in fact have Great Western Trail. And that's an interesting game in its own right. We're talking in the crew about the sort of tight design team putting out a really focused game there. Well, here we have, in Great Western Trail, something that's pretty unusual in the hobby. We have Alexander Pfister, who is the designer, the solo designer on this game, is also one of the 2 artists listed as creating the visuals for this game. And, it doesn't get more focused than that, except, I suppose, if you're the only. But I you know what? As this all unfolds, we'll see if there are any games on the bracket where there's just one designer and they are also the artist. I don't think that's the case, though.
I don't think so. There's a few of those unicorns running around the hobby, but it's a rarity.
Yeah, well, and, this is where we're going to talk maybe a little about some of the industry aspects that are going on here. This is an Eggert Spiel game. This is not a Kickstarted game. This is a game that came out right to the stores. I think you're more likely to sort of run into that designer artist in the Kickstarter space than in the sort of industry machine space.
Sure. Yeah, Great Western Trail it had an interesting publication path. When we first got our first copies that came over in the United States were Stronghold. And then somewhere along the line, Eggert Spiel started distributing straight to the U.S., which had to be a bummer for Stronghold because Great Western Trail has stayed a strong contender in the market.
Well, actually, I mean, if you're going to look at the number of copies listed as being owned on Board Game Geek, yeah, they've got a lot more copies out there of Great Western Trail than there are of Brass Birmingham. I know that hurts you to hear, Brendan.
Well, I think that does speak to the differences in distribution between a company like Eggert Spiel, which is set up through distribution companies, and a newer player in the market like Roxley. We think of Roxley as pretty established now, but they're really not even a decade old yet, I don't think. And so, yeah, they're just not producing numbers. Although I imagine Brass Birmingham, with its high place in the BGG ratings, is just going to be a golden goose for a while.
Oh yeah, I think it's an evergreen.
Thinking about Great Western Trail for a minute, we didn't really talk about, I talked about both of these games as economic games, but they're not the same. In Brass, you're running industry, and in Great Western Trail, you're really traversing a giant rondel. And everybody likes a good rondel, and you're building buildings that then other people have to pay.
The Rondels they're one of my favorite Motown bands.
That's right. wait, Mr. Pfister. But you're acquiring cows that you're going to deliver to market. You're deciding which routes to take. It's challenging to figure out how to use the American West in a way that is not exploitative. And I think they do a decent job in Great Western Trail. They do represent indigenous people without being too stereotypical about them.
Oh, and that's a tough needle to thread.
It is. I will say the game mostly ignores the question of Manifest Destiny itself, but it doesn't really feel like it's about Manifest Destiny. You know, you think about other games in the setting, something like Carson City, or other games where you're building a town that comes on land that's been stolen from other people, as opposed to, you know, Great Western Trail. You're certainly moving cows across that Western land, but at this point it's already been established. You're part of the relatively new West rather than building the West, if that makes sense.
Sure. Well, and this is something, talking about sort of theme here, something we're going to revisit again and again in these games. You know, how does the theme of the game affect your experience thereof? They do a fairly good job, as you were saying here, threading that needle. There are other games on the bracket, I think maybe predominantly some of the older games, that do a little less work toward that. And we're going to see if they end up getting punished for that. You know, I'm looking at you, Puerto Rico. Mm-hmm. I'm looking at you.
So how exactly would they get punished though, Rob? This is just a bracket. It's just a competition. How would that punishment happen?
By you going to @GameFightShow on Twitter and letting your voice be heard. Go there and vote.
Man, I cannot wait to see how these matchups are going to come out.
I think that you're going to have to wait until our next show, which is going to be in just 2 days. Do you believe it? Wednesday is our next show. This tournament, you know, one thing we didn't talk about is this March Mayhem tournament is so epic that it's going to be 6 awesome weeks, starting, as you might have noticed, it is not yet March.
It's too exciting to contain to 1 month.
March cannot hold us.
So we're going to start here, and we're going to keep going until this all culminates on March 27th in a live broadcast finale where we find out which game comes out on top. But we're not going to find anything out if you don't go to Twitter and vote. You go there, we'll be here talking to you about it this Wednesday. This has been Rob Huber with
Brendan Riley,
here with you for Game Fight Show's March Mayhem Tournament, brought to you by Rattlebox Game.
Game Fight Show. Game Fight Show.
Brought to you by
Rattlebox Games.